Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're all having a good Thursday. Last month, we asked you to introduce yourself through the online discussion group, and we really appreciate the thoughtful introductions and a lot of the responses that we got during the last month. Now, for this month, a handout for today's presentation was posted to the online community. It's not mandatory that you have it during the presentation, but it's a great takeaway sheet. This is the first topic webinar within the HFTP Leadership Excellence Series. Topic webinars explore current issues affecting the workplace environment. While some of today's workforce is made up of deep-rooted, dependable staff, a large number of positions are now experiencing unprecedented turnover, especially in the finance area. Leadership is being able to slow this turnover by effectively managing and impeding short-term workforce and maximizing the time that you have with each employee. So without any further ado, here is our speaker for today, Courtney Ramsey. And take it away, Courtney.
Thank you so much, Scott. Everyone, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for joining us today on a random Thursday afternoon. I hope you're having a great day. And I hope you also have your chat box open because we're going to have lots of fun times today, chatting and engaging with each other. And I just want to kick it off with a few questions. In the chat box, type yes if you've been told recently, you know what, you just have to do more with less. Anyone? Potentially, yeah, I'm seeing lots of yeses come in. Type yes in the chat box lately if you're a little scared that your best employee, the one that actually lets you get sleep at night because you feel good about him or her being at work. Type yes if you're scared that person might leave. A few more yeses coming in at a very rapid pace, I might add. And do me a favor. Tell me if I could give you at least just one tip that would help you save that one person who's coming to mind for you right now. Would the next 50 minutes of your life be worth it? There's a few more yeses. Yes, I'm saying some yes in all caps. Good, 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 good. Well, everyone, that's what we're going to talk about today. Today, we're going to talk about the very big changes in the marketplace when it comes to talent development and talent acquisition and how to keep your employees longer. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I think the 8 days of hiring someone and keeping them until retirement, that might be gone. But the good news is we can talk about ways to keep our employees longer. So right now, if you have someone who's staying a year or 2 years, that's your average tenure. Our goal is to stretch that out a little bit more. So with that, let's get going today. We're going to talk about the market and the changes in the marketplace, and we're going to start telling you a little bit more about what's happening, why it's happening, and most importantly, what you can do about it. So to get us going, now my guess is by now, you know, this is definitely an employee's market. Just like the housing market kind of ebbs and flows between a seller's market and a buyer's market, right now we are experiencing an employees market. They seem to have a lot of the power right now. Now, you're probably wondering, why is that? Most of these probably are pretty apparent, but just to kind of remind you of where we've been the last couple of years, we here at Magnet Culture like to talk about the 4 C's of the Great Resignation. The first one is beyond capacity. And think about this if you are an avid watcher of wrestling. Think about being in the ring and kind of tapping out because you are absolutely done. So many of our employees have reached that tapping out point. They have been asked to do more and more with less and less, and they're done. So we're seeing people tapping out because they're beyond capacity. We're also seeing people with a lot more choices right now. And I know you don't have to be an expert in the job market to know that everyone is hiring right now. And everyone is even more open to talent that maybe 5-10 years ago, we wouldn't necessarily have looked at. So for example, those resume gaps, workplace gaps, where you have a year or two and you don't really know where this person was, that used to be a red flag on a resume. And maybe for you, it kind of still is, but we're still willing to bring them in for an interview in a lot of cases. Maybe you're expanding the reach and the net out to source and interview candidates that may not have direct experience in your industry or that specific role. And we're seeing that because employees have so much more choices like this. They're being very picky. We're also having to compete against employers who are able to offer jobs that are so much less tethered. So hybrid work, completely remote work, the kind of work where maybe you have even just a very flexible work schedule. That is something that's really very apparent right now. And most of our employees who are looking for jobs are looking for that freedom to have that hybrid environment or a remote environment. The other thing we're seeing is the gig economy. So think about how much work out there is freelance work now, contract work, or even the kind of work that is truly work you can get up and running on same day. A couple of examples for you. My husband Brad was laid off of his financial, kind of like a C, not quite a C level position, but a high level director position for a company you might know of. It's a company that rents certain machines for you to clean your carpet. You might know them because you've seen them in Walmart or Lowe's or Home Depot. Well, he was one of their financial people, and they restructured and they decided they could hire a couple more people for his salary. So they laid him off. Now his severance wasn't the most generous because he'd only been there for a couple of years. So pretty quickly that severance ran out, and he decided he needed to do something else to bring in some more income to still at least try to pay some bills. So he decided to get up and running with DoorDash. So here's my next question for you. This one's for chat. Okay. In the chat box, tell me how long you think it took my husband, Brad, to get up and running on DoorDash to where he was able to deliver his first order. How long do you think it took? Put that in the chat for me. Big spans here. I'm seeing everything from 1 week, 24 hours, a month. I'm seeing 2 hours, 5 minutes, 48 hours, lots of different guesses here. The answer is 20 minutes. 20 minutes to get up and running on DoorDash. Now, granted, if you were going to Uber or drive Lyft and actually have people in your car, not McDonald's, it's going to take you a little bit longer. But when you're just driving food, you can download that app and get everything up and running to be delivering DoorDash for a customer within about 20 minutes. So think about that. Think about that means when it comes to those choices we're talking about. People are much more apt to quit their job knowing they have so many alternatives. So before, people wouldn't quit unless they had that safety net, either a really good savings to draw back on or a job waiting for them in the wings. Now we see people who are much more apt to go ahead and take that next position, or rather leave their current position because they know they have alternatives. So yes, we're beyond capacity, we're beyond choice, we have more choices. We also have a lot more comparison data. You know, back in the day, there were a couple of things that you really didn't talk about, right? You didn't talk about politics, you didn't talk about religion, and what else did you not talk about? Put it in the chat box for me. What's that third thing you never talked about? Yes, salary, pay, money, absolutely. Isn't it funny how now with social media especially, we're seeing a whole lot of discussion on things like politics, religion, and pay. So that comparison data is out there just by word of mouth, but you've also seen those websites like Glassdoor or LinkedIn where they give you lots of data about what it's like to work for a certain company or a certain group. And they give you the good, they give you the bad, they give you the ugly. Right? So there's lots of comparison data out there. A lot of positions are actually posting what the salary is in their actual job description. So we have that sort of data out there too. And then last but not least, we have people who are just quite frankly, the confident to change. They are realizing they have all these choices out there. I read a study really recently saying that most people here in the US feel very confident they can find their next well-paying job within 6 months or less. And a lot of them are willing to do things we talked about, live off of their savings or drive DoorDash, drive Uber to make ends meet until they find that next job. So those are the reasons we're seeing a lot of just changes and different things. I would almost even say turmoil in the workplace. These 4 C's of the Great Resignation. Now at Magnet, we like to talk about a couple of things when it comes to really what the employees are in the workplace. We like to say there are two kinds of employees in the workplace, and they are the trees and the revolving doors. Now, just think about a tree for a second here. In the chat box for me, what do you think are some qualities of an employee I would describe as a tree? What do you think they would be described as? Employees who have loyalty, they're rooted, they're reliable, loyal, strong. Yes. Yes to every single thing you're putting in this chat box right now. I like to think of them having different kinds of roots. Roots because perhaps they have a really good salary they're happy with. They like the job they do. They like the people they work with. Perhaps they love the feeling they get from doing that job. Like we're saying here, they help build the company. They help build up their colleagues. They're essentially loving their job. And those are the kind of trees we love. We want to have those keys. Those trees. There are steady people. They are the ones who, again, help us sleep a little better at night because we know they're with us. But there's also a different kind of tree. And if we're keeping it real, they're the kind of trees that we really kind of wish would just uproot themselves and slowly walk away to a new forest, if you know what I'm saying, right? Those are those trees that maybe are not as engaged as they used to be. So let's think about that one. What might be keeping someone in their role, even though they don't really like the work they're doing? And they're not very engaged anymore? What might be keeping them rooted with you? Fear, laziness, money, pay, salary, security. Yep, all the things, habit. A lot of times you probably have heard that expression, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. Yeah, that applies to some of our trees that we kind of wish would just move on out, but they are staying rooted because perhaps they don't have that confidence to make that change. They know they can't make the same salary or get the same benefit package somewhere else. Or for sometimes we just see that they just have kind of like that rock star status on their team. Maybe they have the tenure, they have the seniority, and they're just not willing to give that up. Now, the other kind of employee we have is what we like to call at Magnet Culture, the revolving door. In a nutshell, the revolving door people are the opposite of your steady, strongly rooted trees, the kind of employees that you want to keep. A lot of times they don't have those relationships. They don't have that loyalty. They don't have anything really keeping them with you. And so they're much more likely to leave your place of business at a quicker rate. Now, it's time for a poll. We're going to launch our first poll here. I would love to know what percentage of your employees are falling within that category. So let's see if we can launch our first poll, and let me know your thoughts here. What percentage of your current employees are trees? Would you say less than 25%, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, or more than 75? I'll give you about 5 more seconds to type in your answer, make your selection. Okay, we can go ahead and close that one out and share it. So you can see the majority of you here are saying you kind of in that middle category or one of the two middle categories. About 51% of you are saying 25 to 50% of your employees fall into that tree category. And 50 to 75% have about 34 of you saying that's where your trees are right now, which is pretty high. I have to say that's a pretty high number. Here's my question for you in chat, though. We're going to close that one out. In 5 years, do you see your percentage of trees going up or down? Put this one for me in chat, up or down? Yeah, I'm seeing 1 or 2 ups, which is fantastic. And I'm seeing a lot of downs. Yeah, and that's about the thing, right? We really have to think about how people are becoming much more okay with uprooting themselves and leaving to a new position, sometimes even when they're really happy. So we have to start thinking about how are we going to turn more people into at least trees that stay with us longer, or how can we keep them longer than what we might be doing right now. So today we're going to start talking about really what keeps people. What keeps people? And we also want to make sure we have the mindset that every new hire is a flight risk. I say that because our new hires are more likely to be those people we like to call revolving doors. Again, it comes down to not having that sense of loyalty. And when you think about what loyalty is really tied to, a lot of times we have to have those bare basics in place, right? Like we have to be well fitted for the job. We have to like our job to a large degree. We probably need to be paid at a decent rate, maybe not the highest of the high, but it needs to be a competitive rate that we feel okay about. But what really makes people loyal and what studies show keeps people there the longest because it contributes to job satisfaction the most is relationships. Relationships with their leader, but also relationships with their colleagues and their peers. So we have to think about how can we get people into the door and really start to make sure they are starting to build relationships from day one. That's a big part. We also have to let them know that we believe in them and we want them to stay long-term. So we have to make sure they know there's opportunities for growth and development with us, because that's a big one too. So we're going to talk primarily about those two things, and we're going to give you several strategies that you can start to implement immediately. Before I do this, I want to give you a chance to get some freebies, because if you are like me, there is nothing better than leaving a workshop like this with tools you can actually use. So do me a favor, break out your phone, or if you're on your computer, you can go to the website magnetvault.com. But if you have your phone with you, all you need to do is take out your phone, hold it up to the QR code, and you can get to the vault that way. It is going to ask you for your information. And let me just tell you right now, once you get past that initial little survey form, if you just bookmark this page, you'll be able to go back to it time and time again without having to enter that information. You're going to find that there's a great deal of tools and freebies in there, some of which I'm going to refer to today. So do me a favor, when you're looking at the slides, look at the bottom right or left-hand corner. And in most cases, if you see a little magnet icon there, that means there's a tool in the vault that corresponds to what I'm talking about on that slide. So hopefully you have that tool up by now. And we're going to get into our first thought here. Another mindset comes into thinking about what is true for you versus what is true for all. So here's your next chat question. If you have a meeting that starts at 8:30 a.m., what time do you arrive so you're not late? What time? So check out the chat. We're getting a lot of different kinds of answers here. Some of you are saying as early as 8, even I think I saw one 7:45. Some of you are saying 8:29. I'm looking at 8:28, 8:29. Yeah, so a lot of different answers here. And the interesting thing about that is when you think about it, maybe except for this very last one that said 8:35, none of them are necessarily wrong, right? Because being late is often a matter of subjectivity. There's not like a hard and fast rule that says at this time you will be late. But depending on your context, depending on how you were exposed to things growing up, you might think that if you're not 10 minutes early, you're late. And others of you might think walking in and taking a seat right at 8:30 is perfectly fine. And the good news is neither of you are necessarily right nor wrong. The thing is, sometimes we really have a propensity to think that our thoughts and our opinions are the absolute capital T truth, the truth. And in reality, most of our beliefs are actually opinions, not necessarily facts, right? The same revolves around the concept of professionalism. Professionalism and work ethic especially, and what is a good or bad level of either one, those are subjective. Those are subjective. So we have to realize people are coming into the workplace with very different thoughts on what it means to have a good work ethic or being professional. What does that look like? What does it sound like? So we're all different, and we want to make sure we're keeping the people who are good for our team. They're a good fit for us culturally. They're doing a good job. And those are the people we're going to talk about today. They may have different opinions on what is or is not a good work ethic, or what is or is not professional. But we want to be able to understand those people more because they are good people that we want to keep on our team. Now, that being said, I have to say the obvious here. Some people, they're not the best, right? They are probably a bad hire. Maybe they're those disengaged trees that's really, it's time for them to move on. When we talk about our magnet strategies today, please know I'm not necessarily talking about keeping every single employee, because not everyone is the best fit for our team. But I do want to keep those people who are contributing and who have potential to do well with us. So let's look at those 6 magnet strategies that we're going to cover briefly today. First of all, managerial effectiveness. Secondly, attraction and recruiting. Guidance upon entry, otherwise known as how you onboard people. New staffing models, empowered champions, and trust through transparency. Now, for the sake of time, because we really do only have about 50 minutes together total, when from start to finish for this portion of the presentation, we're not going to cover all these in great depth. We're going to cover some more than others. But the good news is I have another free resource for you, and that is at magnetwebinars.com. So feel free to write that website down, or you can screenshot this slide really fast. If you were to go to magnetwebinars.com, you will find an individual webinar on each of these 6 strategies to take you into more depth on each one. So once again, magnetwebinars.com. All right, next question for you for chat. Question is, you just asked, how are you? Do you want a real answer? Type yes or no in the chat box for me. Depends. Lots of yeses. And thank you. I'm so glad to know there are some really good people out there. I like how some of you are, really being very, very truthful. Like I'm seeing James is saying, probably, but it depends on the relationship. Stephanie says it depends on who you ask, right? Yes, it probably depends on how much you have on your plate and how much time you have to give that person. And you know what? The truth of the matter is, no matter what your job out there, the truth of the matter is most of us are what I like to call firefighting all the time. There is always an emergency. There is always something that was due probably 10 minutes ago. There is always something else that you didn't even think was a priority until you walked into your office that day and you realized, oh, this is how my day is going to be spent. So sometimes we have a tendency to focus on fighting those fires and to focus on getting the results, getting all of our deliverables checked off and turned in. And we don't really focus on relationships. And let me tell you, that is really a struggle when it comes to creating the kind of loyal environment that we want. So one of the first things that I want to talk to you about when it comes to being a more effective manager is the importance of genuinely checking in with your team. And truth be told, this is hard because a lot of us just don't have a lot of time. This is one of those things that we intend to do, but we always seem to put it on the back burner. Or as I like to call it, we hit snooze on it, thinking I'm going to get to it later. I'll just snooze on it for a little bit longer. And then later never comes. And then people leave. So my first question to you is, if you are a leader of people, or even if you're just a leader of yourself and you work with a robust team, when is the last time you have genuinely checked in with your team? When's the last time you've asked the question of how are you and meant it and didn't just talk work? I'm seeing lots of good stuff in the chat box today, weekly, almost daily. That's fantastic. Please keep that up, because one of the reasons people stay at their employer longer is because you're doing things like this. People do not want to just feel like a number, nor do they want to feel like they're not known to their leaders or their peers. They want to have those close relationships, and genuinely checking in is one of the most important things you can do. Another thing you can do for yourself and for your team, if you lead leaders, or if you lead people that you are grooming to become a leader of a team, is you have to invest in those people. We have to make sure we're developing leaders at every single level, from emerging leader to frontline leader on up. Now, here at Magnet Culture, we do this in a variety of ways. We do virtual sessions like this. We come in, we do live workshops, we do keynotes, we do conferences, we have online programming. But truth be told, there's a variety of different things out there that will help you continuously develop up your leaders. And I'm just curious, thinking about your leadership team right now, let's do another quick poll. This one's around leadership development and training. So if we can launch that second poll for me. And we'll take a look at the second question. The question here is, does anyone on your team need more professional development? Is the answer no? We have effective training programs in place for employees at all levels. Or yes, because some have access and some don't. Or yes, absolutely yes, we have few of any training programs in place and everyone could benefit. We give you about 10 more seconds. Okay, let's go ahead and close out that poll and look at the results. So the results here, and this is, by the way, very typical for most of these sessions I do across all industries. Most people say they have a lot of training opportunity. Maybe your team, or your company has a few programs in place, but a lot of times they're for very specific groups, or they're not accessible to all. So everyone could benefit from more training. And again, the good news is you can hire companies to do it. You can hire people internally to be on your staff 24/7 to do training and development. That was actually my former role when I worked for a company you might know called JCPenney. But the reality is we can do things all the time that are actually very free. One of the things I already told you about was those magnet webinars, magnetwebinars.com. Think about how that is a complete free resource to you. And all you would need to do is to share those that webinar with someone on your team, maybe in like a staff meeting, watch it as a group and discuss it as a group. That's a way we can do some training. And I believe we shared the poll already, but if we didn't, you're welcome to share that now. Another way you can do that, another really easy, free way to do training, is that we can include training and mentoring in existing meetings. So yes, we can watch webinars as a group. We can do things like just even have our employees who are good at something, they have a specific skill, share that skill with the rest of our group. Back when I worked at JCPenney, we had someone on the team who was a technical genius. And she was so very good in Microsoft PowerPoint. She could make amazing things happen in PowerPoint. And granted, this was 10 years ago. So PowerPoint wasn't, as people weren't as savvy quite back then. They were kind of using it for the basic bullets and things like that. But we just had her give us really her top 3 PowerPoint tips at the beginning of a meeting. And that counted as some employee development and some good things we could have going on in terms of giving people skills in a completely free way. So let's think about that, because it looks like, again, when we show the poll, the majority of you are saying you need more training. How can you start to include training and mentoring in existing meetings? Even a stand-up huddle, if you were to have those, you could have something for the first 5 minutes to be mentoring or skill sharing in some way, in a way that's completely free to your business. All right. Next quick chat question for you. Do you take your new hires to lunch during their first week, even if they are remote? Yes or no? Getting a mix here, but a lot of yeses, or yeses we try to, right? I love Tessa's answer here. We need to, right? And think about, again, that is an easy way to start to build a relationship from day one. So continuing on with our next strategy of onboarding, how do you really bring people in and guide them well, especially that first month or so of the time they have with you? Something as simple as taking them to lunch on day one, or if they're a remote employee, sending them a coupon or a gift certificate for their favorite restaurant, or having DoorDash deliver them their favorite meal, right? And then you can have that meal together online. I know no one really likes to eat on camera. I get that. But it's an easy way for you to, again, start to build that relationship. And I want you to continue to think about your day one. Is day one welcoming? I do a lot of work with a lot of industries where there's a lot of different training and legality kind of things they have to get passed off on day one. And sometimes we have a tendency to get them in, we get their paperwork in, then we sit them in front of a computer and they do online computer training for a good 4, 5, 6 hours in a row. And we wonder why day one wasn't exciting. Why was day one or even week one something that didn't get them fired up about saying yes to this job? So think about your day one. Are you helping them build relationships? Are you treating them like they're special? Are you doing something like giving them a checklist of all the training that they're going to have that first week or that first month, or even in their first 30, 60, and 90 days? The more we can make people feel that we've thought of them, that we appreciate them, that we value them, and that we are looking out in their best interest, the better first initial impression they're going to have of us. and the more likely they're going to stay with us for long terms. I love Susan's comment here. She said that we need to have a list of goals, short-term setup with a buddy to assist. I love the concept of a work buddy assigned on day one, because again, I like to think of this as the relationships as being the most important part. The relationships are what are going to keep people there. Think about going to a party. If you were to go to a party and you only knew the host, so you walk in the front door of that party, the host greets you warmly, says, thank you for coming, here's a beverage that you like. And then they say, you know what, I'll try to check in with you later. I have to go get some more drinks and make sure everyone's doing okay. So they leave and they go do the party hosting thing, and you're left to your own devices, and you don't feel like you're included in any group. No one's giving you that, come talk to us. We want to talk to you and get to know you vibe. You do maybe 1 or 2 passes. No one's even making eye contact with you. Do you stay at the party a long time, or do you go home? Give me your honest answer in chat. Do you stay or do you go? Stay or go, stay or go. I'm leaving. I am leaving. I'm, believe it or not, a natural introvert. And I know people think, oh, no, you're not. You're not. No, really, I am. So I can do things like this all day long, but you put me in a party environment or a networking environment where I don't feel included, I'm leaving. And that is exactly what most people, with these, maybe the exception of Tessa here, because Tessa's saying she would make friends. But most people are going to leave if they don't feel included and they don't feel welcoming. With that, one more thing we have to make sure we're doing is thinking of how we're matching them with the right person to be a training buddy, if we do match them up, or thinking through how the rest of our tenure team is going to treat that new person. Because one thing we see a lot is that sometimes our existing staff eat their young. I know that sounds really nasty. We can all say, ew. In fact, if you want to write ew in the chat box, feel free. It's a nasty sounding concept. It's from obviously the animal kingdom, but certain industries, especially healthcare in many cases, are known for having very tenured employees that maybe are not as welcoming to new hires. And they'll say things like, well, I'm going to show you this once because you better take some notes. I'm not going to repeat myself. Or, you know what, you're lucky to even get some training because back when I was hired 30 years ago, I had to just figure it all out. Or maybe they're just kind of old and not old like age old, just they've been there for a while. They're a little disenchanted and they just don't want to deal with someone new. Those are the wrong people to be matching your new hires up with. So when you're thinking about the buddy system, when you're thinking about who you would want to get people going and matching and trying to get those relationships going, be really careful that you're putting the right person with the right person who you just hired. We want to make sure that they are the kind of person that creates a welcoming and warm environment. Now, when you think about the way we do business, and you think about the way we keep people longer, the majority of people out there want to move up. The majority, not all. So that's why you have to have career conversations with people, because not everyone wants to keep getting promoted or keep moving into that next position. A lot of people are happy where they are. But a lot of new hires, especially our Gen Z and millennial generations, they are looking for those promotions. So if you're hiring someone into a position that it takes them a bit longer to get that first promotion, I want you to think about how you can create some stepping stones for people. By that, I mean, let's say you have an analyst level 1, right? And to get to an analyst to say a senior analyst, it's going to take you a good 3 years. Could we have an analyst level 1, maybe create a level 2 and a level 3? So then we can work our way up in that mini band, if you will, before we make that big jump to senior analyst, or before we make that big jump to a managerial analyst, right? Think about how we can create different ways for people to grow faster. Yes, scope would expand with each little baby bump in that stepping stone. Yes, salary would need to also be expanded out. So we have to think through how we would do this. But when we have places for people to grow, it's going to make them more apt to want to stay with you longer because they see the path. And by the way, it is not too early to start talking about career path and next steps in the person's first month on the job. Your new hires want to know that you see them long-term with you and that you're already thinking ahead on how you're going to get them to that next level. Looking over here in the chat, definitely people are saying that y'all agree with more employees need to share with new hires a development plan. Oh, see, we're seeing the exact same thing I just said. I love it. And orientation should show a specific development path for all employees within their career path within the company. I love that, James. And let's not be afraid to show that maybe you came in right here, and the logical step would be to stay in this path, but you could also potentially go over here or over here. Show all the options. The more options they have, the better. So again, that's creating more stepping stones, more stepping stones. Something else we want to make sure we're doing when it comes to getting people to stay longer is making sure that you feel appreciated, or rather they feel appreciated. So at Magna Culture, we have the advice we like to give of appreciating any job well done. Now, I know that's really tough sometimes, because if you were like me, you were probably as a kid not given the most, go get 'ems or good jobs or that a girl, that a boy kind of thing. For me, it took, I think, like an act of Congress to get a good job from my dad. So if that was you, please type yes in the chat box. Let me know I was not alone. Yes. So for many of us, we don't necessarily think we have to appreciate someone coming to work on time. We don't think we have to appreciate them being a steady B player and doing their job. But let me ask you this question. How many of you have employees who don't show up on time? Please put yes in the chat box. People who don't show up on time. How many of you have people who show up and are physically there, but they are not mentally there? How many of you have people who are actually doing more harm than good sometimes when they're on the job? Yeah. So when you compare these two people, when you compare your steady players who show up on time and do their job, maybe they're not rock stars, maybe they're not going above and beyond every day. When you compare them to the other people, don't we genuinely appreciate them? I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say thank goodness for those people. My question becomes then for you, when is the last time you told them that? Because all it takes is you just pulling someone aside who is your steady B plus player and saying something like, hey, Scott, you know what? I just need you to know that you are the reason that I sleep a little better at night. You're reliable, you're dependable. When you're here, I know you're doing your job. And I just want to thank you, because I realize right now you have choices that you could probably make, and you don't have to stay with us, but you do. And I needed you to know that I see that and I value that. That is all you got to say to someone who is a B player, who is doing their job, and think about how far that's going to go. So start thinking about how you can truly express thanks and appreciation for people, even if they're not your A++ rock star players, because they are important and we do need them. So let's start thinking more about how we can appreciate any job well done, and start looking for the things you can recognize even more. Okay, next question. Next question for you in chat is baby carrots. What are some baby carrots you would like to receive? Now, by that, I mean, there are big carrots out there, right? There are things like, if you are here long enough, you get a better 401k match, perhaps, or you get vested in your 401k or some stock option abilities. Maybe after a year, you get more sick leave, paid time off, things like that. What are some small things that you would like to see potentially be given to you as a way of rewarding you, let's say in 3 months, in 6 months? A thank you. Art is simple. I love it, Art. A very simple thank you. Kathleen says summer hours. I'm seeing pick your schedule. Yeah, PTO. Take the afternoon off. Exactly. Flex schedule, an assistant. Vicki, you're aiming high. I like this about you, Vicki. Paid day to not work with my team, but with other teams within the company, so you can learn from them. I love that one, Fernando. Now think about that. Not all these are freebies necessarily, right? But a lot of them are. A lot of them are things that you probably could work in as baby carrots, if you will, for your team. Incentives people could get in a more immediate basis to give them a reason to want to stay longer. Because the truth of the matter is, when we think about keeping our people, a lot of times the carrots we offer are the big carrots. So let's start thinking about how we can break those carrots up into those little baby carrots and get people to stay even longer. All right, I'm going back to the chat here because there's lots of good things here. Hybrid options, flexibility, training, retreats, triple salary and work only 1 day a week. Again, Art, I like the way you think. Early dismissal of pay, hybrids, remotes. Yes, A+ answer, Joanne. What was Joanne's answer? Yes, flexibility, training, retreats. Yeah. So think about how we could do more of that. How can we have more baby carrots, even if it's baby carrots that you offer specifically to your team? I know one of my favorite bosses that I used to work with back at JCPenney, we did not have a comp policy when it came to pay. But when you're in training and development, a lot of times you will do things that are way outside the realm of your normal working hours, as I'm sure many of you have too. So for example, we would often come in and do training videos overnight. Because we were to go to a store, we would have to have the store completely shut down and quiet for us to actually film in a store. So we would sometimes work in the entire night to shoot a training video. And though it was not necessarily company policy, my boss recognized that, and she would give us that Friday off to make sure we were kind of compensated for that time. Was it official? No. Did she have to? Absolutely not. But those little thank yous and baby carrots, if you will, really went a long way. And even other things, like you're saying, rewards for their families. Richard, I love that one. I've heard so many great stories of leaders actually writing thank you notes to someone's family instead of that direct person, to say thank you for letting that person, maybe work some overtime or come in when they were scheduled for a day off, or just saying thank you for having such a great family member who's such a fantastic contributor on the team. But recognizing and rewards for the families, whether it's a thank you note or movie tickets to the zoo, things like that, they can go a really long way. And Adam, I love that you love that too. The family rewards, again, not a lot of people are doing that. So I want you to start thinking about what commitment you're going to work through today. What could you commit to right now? And by the way, I think we have one last poll question for this one, so we can launch that last poll. What can you commit to when it comes to doing things differently? Could you communicate your expectations more clearly and be more effective as a manager? Could you start to appreciate any job well done? Could you start to include training in existing meetings? Could you let everyone watch a webinar and discuss it at your next all-team meeting? Could you create a baby carrot? Let's see. About 2/3 of you in right now. We're going to go for a little bit longer, get you some more answers in here. All right. Let's see. We can stop sharing right there. We can end the poll. We can share. So the majority of you are committing to that second one, appreciating any job well done. I love that one. I think you will get a lot of return on your very, very little investment there. That is basically a freebie that can go a long way. Some of you are committing to including mentoring and training in existing meetings. Also a good one. So how can we just do more training out there? There's so many free resources. And of course, we're here at Magnet Culture if you ever want to contact us for ideas as well. We're going to talk more specifically about communicating your expectations, but that's a really big one too, because a lot of times we expect people to be mind readers, and that's just not the case. So really clearly communicating your expectations is key. And of course, about 1/4 of you said that you're going to think about and create some new carrots for your team. I love it. I love it. Okay, we're going to close out that poll. You can go ahead and close it down if it's still on your screen. And I love that Grant saying, I already do all those 4 commitments, but I can definitely do more of those baby carrots. There's always something we can even do more of, to your good point, Grant, if we just kind of put our thoughts out there. All right, so another thing I want to give you before we start closing out for today is one more tool to start prioritizing your retention efforts. So if you go to retentionaudit.com, you're going to find a 10-question assessment that will give you an idea of where you should start prioritizing your retention efforts. So go ahead and download that one for me. That's another great tool. And then I just want to remind you one more time of that vault that is out there. Okay. All right. So I'm going to see, are there any questions out there? It looks like a lot of the questions have been answered live, which is good. But if there's any questions, now's the time to actually put them out there for me. I do see a question here. The question is, what if there isn't a logical career path at your organization? For instance, the next step up is your own job. Do you accept they're going to leave? Adam, that's such a good question. So what happens if there's not a path? Maybe you are the path. And by just virtue of you staying longer, you're blocking that next position for that person. I would just ask that you really get to know what that person really wants to do next. Because sometimes we assume that we know they just logically maybe would want our position next, but that isn't the case. Sometimes they don't want your position next. They actually have their eyes on something else. So think about how you can have a good career conversation to get to know what that person truly wants to do next and potentially explore some options, especially if they do say, like it's quite possible, Adam, they say, actually, Adam, I do want your job next. When are you going to retire? When are you going to move on? That could happen. And, that's where you have to be kind of honest and say, you know what, I'm really happy here. And I want to find something else for you to grow into. So let's start exploring our options. My guess is most of us work for companies that are big enough where we want to keep good people. And I work with a lot of companies that often say, I will find a home for a good person. Even if I have no positions open, I will find a spot for that person because I know something is going to open eventually and we're going to have a need for them. So my guess is that even though we might have to reskill or upskill someone to keep them longer, if they are good at their job, and if they have those things that, as a former recruiter myself, I used to say, you can't train, you can't really train, like you can't train a good attitude necessarily. You can't train passion. You can't train initiative. You can't train reliability, dependability, and accountability. If they have all those things that you cannot train, oh my gosh, let's find a place to put them. Let's see here. I'm looking to see if there's any more questions here. It looks like in the Q&A portion, we don't.
I know there was a few people raising their hand in the beginning of the presentation, and I did lower your hand, but if you want to go ahead and post those questions so Courtney can answer, feel free.
That would be great. Very interested in seeing any other questions. You can post them into the chat or you can post them into the Q&A portion. Let's see. Ooh, baby bird. I like that, baby bird. And Grant has a very valid point here. He says that sometimes it's also great to allow people to fly from the nest. It's on us to allow people to be their best. And you're right. There's a friend of mine who still contributes his career path to his boss sitting him down and saying, you know what? You have such a long, great, promising career ahead of you. And as much as I would like to keep you here and to have you grow with us, I feel like right now there's nothing available to help you get to that next step, and you are ready now. So with that, I think you can and you should apply for this job. And he even showed them the right job. He's like, I saw this and it made me think of you. And if I'm doing the right thing for you, I can't hold you back. So sometimes, to Grant's point, we have to make sure we're doing the right thing for our people, even if that means letting them go. I love it. Any other questions? Or is there anything I might have missed in the chat box? Okay. Okay, well, please, again, let me know if you have any more questions. We have time for another one or two if we need to. But there's lots of good content we covered today, and there's lots of great tools out there in terms of the vault. As we, good, Claire, I'm glad you love the toolbox. Thank you so much. As we start to close out today, before I turn it back over to Brittany, I just want to leave you with one last thought. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. You know, many of us, when we first started working, whether it was 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago, we had to kind of put up with certain things. I don't know about you, but I started working in the days where hose hose for women, if they wore skirts, were still a requirement. I cringe just thinking about it. If I am not alone, if you had to wear a hose too back in the day, because that was part of your dress code, please put yes. Please put yes in there. A couple of you did. Yes, thank you. I'm not alone. I still remember wasting a lot of money on hose because it was required. One thing we like to say at Magnet Culture, well, there's a lot of things we like to say, but one of the many things we like to say is try to leave the campground better than you found it. Meaning just because things are done a certain way, just because we had to put up with certain things when we first started working years ago, does not mean we have to keep it that way. It does not mean we have to make that status quo be the status quo forever. So how can you, as a leader of yourself or a leader of a team, how can you make your place of work a better place to work? One thing we like to say at Magnet, in addition to all the other sayings I've already given you, is to communicate your expectations. And I told you we revisit this. The CEO of Magnet Culture, her name is Kara Soletto. And Kara tells a story of her first job out of college. She calls it her first big girl job, right? And it was in a small office, maybe 10, 15 people, most of which were women, not client facing. We didn't have lots of people coming in and out the door, but it was an office professional dress code. So she had to wear, typically pants or a skirt. She had to wear heels. And ladies, especially now, if you've been like me and you've been wearing slippers because of COVID, right? You know the trauma it is on your feet to go back to wearing a heel. Well, think back to when you first started having to wear heels for the entire workday. It hurts after a while. And so Kara, around 2 or 3 p.m. every day, she would kick off her heels under her desk and she would kind of let her feet breathe. And occasionally she would just go to the copier and make a copy, do what she needs to do. And then when her feet kind of felt recovered enough, she would put her shoes back on. What do you think the people in the office felt about that? How do they feel about Kara walking around barefoot in the office, despite the fact they were pretty much the only ones in the office? Do you think they liked it? Yeah, like Grant said, they were pretty appalled. But do you think they told her? No. No one told her. They all just kind of whispered about her behind her back. And finally, someone who kind of took her aside and had the courage to be very candid with her, pulled her aside and said, you know what, Kara, you're doing a lot of great work here. And I think people would notice if you kept your shoes on all day long. And Kara was appalled, to use Grant's word, because she didn't know it was a problem. She didn't realize she was doing anything wrong. But if we take a step back here, remember professionalism, work ethic, things that we think are hardcore facts and our opinions are facts, often they're opinions. They're different perspectives. And we have to realize that not every single person thinks just like us. Not everyone was exposed to the same things we were exposed to as young children or adults. Not everyone has the same way of approaching different things. So sometimes we think everything should be common sense, and it's not necessarily common sense. You see, nowhere in that employee handbook and the dress code did it say you have to keep your shoes on all day long. Kara's mom didn't sit her down when her college graduation and say, now, Kara, just so you know, very important, shoes, got to stay on all day. This was not covered in onboarding. No one told her that. Therefore, everyone thought she should know, but she didn't actually know. So the next time you hear what I like to call red flags going off in your head, things like, oh my gosh, who does that? That is just common sense. Where were they raised? Were they raised in a barn? Who does that, right? Next time you hear those little things going off in your head, that is your sign to take a step back and think, oh my gosh, that's right. We have to make sure we're remembering that not everyone thinks exactly like us, that a lot of things out there are very subjective, and that the one thing I can do as a leader is to make sure I'm always being crystal clear and communicating my expectations. So that is the one thing I just want you to start thinking about going forward immediately after you close out this webinar today. Can you do a better job of communicating your expectations? Because friends, not everyone is psychic. And the more we stop assuming that they are, and that common sense, the way we think of common sense is 100% common, the better we're going to make the place of work and the better we're going to leave that campsite, if you will. So everyone, thank you so much for today. I want to just leave you with my information if you would like to find me online. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn. So I would love it if you would go on LinkedIn right now and just Google me, Courtney Ramsey. You'll find me and hopefully we can connect that way. Otherwise, you're also welcome to go to magnetculture.com or wereduceturnover.com so you can find us there. Okay, with that, I am going to say thank you so much. I don't think we have any other questions, but if we do, Brittany, I'll let me know. I'm going to turn it back over to Brittany to close us out.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Courtney. What a great session that was. We want to keep this conversation going, guys, in our Leadership Excellence series community. So be sure to continue to discuss with one another, and be sure to mark your calendars for next month's leadership lecture, Amplify Your Impact. That will be on March 16th. And as always, I will be sending reminder emails to those who haven't registered already. One last thing is watch for some updates in the community. We're going to give you a little homework assignment before our next session on March 16th. And with that, that closes the session. We appreciate everyone who attended. And thank you, Courtney, so much.
Thank you, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for all the energy and the chatting with me. I appreciate it. Made it fun.